Lincoln Riley bolted from Oklahoma to become the new head coach of USC Football. And I can't say that I blame him. If I was in his shoes, I probably would have did the exact same thing. I mean, how can you turn down the opportunity to live in Cali? As a matter of fact, not just being able to live in the state of Cali, but being able to live in Los Angeles. Now, I've heard a lot of things about Los Angeles, both positive and negative. I have never been to LA. I have lived in Florida for pretty much my whole entire life. But I've heard that they have some nice houses, really nice beaches, a lot of touring attractions. However, I don't really hear a lot of great things about the downtown area. But for Lincoln Riley, I mean, I just felt like it was a no-brainer for him to leave OU for USC because, first of all, you're going to have an easier time when it comes to recruiting. There are just so many great, talented high school football players that live in the California area. So you have access to that. You also are getting a lot of money. So for USC, it just made sense to go ahead and steal Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma pretty much. And then you look at the work that Lincoln Riley has done over the course of this offseason in the transfer portal. You bring in Caleb Williams, who was your starting quarterback during your time last season at OU. You bring in Jordan Addison, who is the Bolentikoff Award winner from last year. You also have Mario Williams, who also is a transfer from Oklahoma. Travis Dye. I mean, USC was doing a lot of work in the transfer portal, and that has a lot of people excited about what USC football could be this year. And when you look at this roster, this is definitely a really good team, especially on offense. I mean, this team is going to be a juggernaut. We already know what Caleb Williams brings to the table at quarterback. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Russell Wilson, but a little bit faster. You have Travis Dye, Austin Jones, Darren Barlow in the backfield. According to many reports coming out of spring camp, it seems as if Lincoln Riley is going to have a three-headed rotation at that running back position. Then at wide receiver, I mean, you're stacked, man. Jordan Addison, Mario Williams. Last year, Jordan Addison caught 100 receptions for 1,593 receiving yards and 17 touchdowns. Him and Caleb Williams are going to end up being the best quarterback wide receiver duo in college football. I know there's going to be a good amount of Ohio State fans who are going to push back on that. If you get mad at that, I can understand why. The offensive line should be pretty good. Some people have questions about the depth, but I think overall the offensive line is in pretty good shape. So on defense, this is where many people have question marks when it comes to the Trojans, because Lincoln Riley, during his time at Oklahoma, never really had any good defenses. He does have talent on the defensive line. I'm not going to try to pronounce any of these guys' names. Trust me, I did look up how to pronounce their names properly, and it just couldn't roll off my tongue the right way. So I'm not going to try to embarrass myself. But you guys know who are the studs on this defensive line. At linebacker, you got Eric Gentry, Shane Lee. I'm a really big fan of what Mekhi Blackman does at the cornerback position. You also have Kalen Bullock there. So I think that if you're Lincoln Riley, you definitely do have some pieces to work with on defense. And when you look at the schedule, I mean, USC doesn't have the toughest schedule in the world. Your home games are going to be against Rice, Fresno State, even though I wouldn't overlook Fresno State because you do play them pretty early in the season. And everybody knows that the majority of upsets that happen in college football happen really early into the regular season. So I wouldn't overlook that Fresno State game, even though I do expect USC to win that game by at least 2 touchdowns. You got to play Arizona State at home, Washington State, Cal, Colorado. Then you face Notre Dame. Now, you have to go on the road and play Stanford. We don't really know what Stanford is going to do this year. Stanford is a program that kind of has been on a downward slide over the last couple of seasons, but maybe this could be the year that David Shaw gets things turned around. I really don't know what has happened to Stanford. They used to be one of the best teams in this conference, and all of a sudden they just started dwindling down for some odd reason. You got Oregon State, who some people think could be a little bit of a sleeper team. That could be a little bit of a trap game for USC. Oregon State definitely is a team that you don't want to overlook. You got to play Utah, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in this segment. Then you got to play UCLA. So for USC, if they're going to be able to make it into the college football playoffs, they're going to have to be able to beat Utah. And I don't think it's going to be able to happen. And I understand that you USC fans are probably really upset that I just said that. But before you start cussing me out in the comment section, before you start yelling at me, first of all, lower your tone real quick, put your keypad down, and let me explain. Yes, you do have a lot of firepower on offense. Yes, you do have a pretty solid offensive line. You do have a really good defensive line. But when you look at Utah, Utah is a really physical football team. And when you look at some of the more successful teams in the Pac-12 over the last couple of years, they always have been really good at the line of scrimmage, which is something that Utah happens to be very well at, being able to dominate teams in. You remember last year when they played Oregon, they demolished them not once, but twice. And people counted them out in both of those games. Then you also got to realize the fact that Utah has 17 out of 22 returning starters back on their team this year. So this is a Utah football team that I think that a lot of USC fans are kind of overlooking. And one thing that Lincoln Riley's teams normally aren't really all that great at are being able to handle themselves against more physical football teams. And a prime example of this is a couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago. Go back to what has happened to Oklahoma in the college football playoffs their last couple of outings. They got manhandled up front. So for USC, if you're going to have a shot at making it into the college football playoffs, you're going to have to go through Arizona. And you might have to end up playing them twice depending on how UCLA and Oregon fare this year. So for USC, yes, you do have a lot of talent when it comes to your skill position, okay? And your offensive line isn't too bad neither. But when you're facing a team like Utah, you just have to be able to handle yourselves up front in the line of scrimmage, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good of a receiver core you have, how good your running backs are, if you can't win at the line of scrimmage. The game of football is win and loss on the line, not about what you have at your skill position and whatnot. If you can't handle yourself up front, you're not going to win too many football games. Utah happens to have one of the best offensive lines in college football this year. Their defensive line is also going to be really good as well. So I just think that when you're looking at Lincoln Riley and this USC football team, do I think they're going to be able to be really good this year? Yes, I do. I would be extremely shocked if this team wins anything less than 8 games. My expectations are at least 9, 10 wins. Some people probably say Pac-12 Championship, which I wouldn't get too mad at you for that. But I just feel that Utah right now, I think that is really their year. I think it's their year that they're finally going to be able to pull through and get into the playoffs this season. And I'm not saying that USC doesn't have a chance. I'm just saying that right now, if Utah and USC played today, I would be taking Utah. And I think Utah will win by at least 10 points, because I think Utah is that good of a football team compared to USC. I think when you're looking at just how physical and how punishing a team Utah is, I just don't know if USC is going to be able to match up with their physicality. Now, they definitely could prove me wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised if they proved me wrong, but I'm just really high on Utah this year. You look at what their head coach did with a lot of underclassmen last year. It was really impressive. It's something that you don't see too often. And I understand there's going to be people that say, well, JT, if Utah's defense is so good, then why did Ohio State put 40 points plus on them in the Rose Bowl? Listen, you're not Ohio State. Ohio State, do you know the kind of players that they have in their offensive line? They have several players on that offensive line this year that are going to be drafted in the first round of the 2023 NFL draft, and they're probably going to have multiple guys that go within the first 2 rounds of next year's draft as well. So in comparison, comparing your offensive line to Ohio State's offensive line, I think there's a pretty big gap there. I'm not expecting for USC to just get doggy walked against Utah. I definitely think the game will be fairly close going into the fourth quarter. But then I think that's when Utah is going to start to pull away, because that's when Utah is at their best. They pound you for the first 3 quarters. They wear you down. And then when you get into the fourth quarter, that's really when your depth gets tested. And for USC, yes, you do have good talent on your front 7. But if you're going to beat a good team like Utah, you're going to have more than just great play from your starters. You're also going to have to be able to have great depth on your bench, because you're going to have to be able to keep guys fresh throughout the first couple of quarters until you get to that fourth quarter, where then you can let everybody go all out. And I just don't think that right now at this moment that USC has a squad that is capable of being able to beat Utah. So I really think that Utah could be the team that keeps USC from making it into the college football playoffs. And not just that, but these Pac-12 teams are pretty inconsistent at times. We've seen it several times, and I'm not saying that Lincoln Riley isn't Mario Cristobal or any of the other Pac-12 coaches. He does have his team prepared more times than not. They don't really suffer too many upsets that often. However, the Pac-12 this year, I think that there are a couple of sleeper teams that could end up surprising a good amount of people. And we also can't sleep on UCLA. UCLA also is a team that has a pretty good offensive line. They're pretty solid up front as well. And they also could give USC a run for their money. So I think that USC is probably going to end up winning 10 games. I think they may end up having 2 losses. Maybe they have a 9-win season at worst, but I don't see them losing no more than 2 or 3 games. I still think that this is going to be a really good football team. This is definitely going to be a top 10 team. However, I don't think they're going to make it into the college football playoffs year 1. I think they're going to lose against Utah, and they may end up suffering another loss during the stretch. But this should still be a really good football team this year. But you guys let me know how you guys feel about the USC Trojans going into the 2022 college football season. Do you guys feel that this is a team that is going to get into the college football playoffs this year? Year 1 under Lincoln Riley? Let me know.